The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long amber fingers across the tall grasses of the savanna, softening the edges of the landscape into gentle gold and ochre. Amid the whispering stalks, a figure lay motionless, its tawny coat blending with the fading light. The lioness had not shifted in hours, her body pressed flat against the earth, ribs rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. The air around her was heavy with stillness, broken only by the occasional twitch of an ear or the faint rustle of grass in the wind. A lone ranger, moving carefully through the fading light, spotted her from a distance. At first he thought she might be resting, but the absence of any natural stretch or roll, the lack of alertness even to the distant call of birds or insects, told a different story. A hush settled over the plain as if the savanna itself held its breath, watching the fragile balance between vigilance and vulnerability. He crouched at a respectful distance, scanning the lioness for signs of injury. The long scar along her flank, dark against the pale dust, hinted at an encounter with the unforgiving rhythms of the wild. Her eyes, partially closed, flickered with faint awareness but offered no focus, no recognition of the soft footfalls approaching. The ranger adjusted his stance, careful not to startle her. He knew that any sudden movement might drive the fragile animal into panic or collapse. Hours could pass in silence, and the patience demanded by the land weighed heavily, measured in small, deliberate breaths and subtle shifts of gaze. A breeze swept through the plain, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant waterholes, brushing gently across her matted fur. Her tail twitched once, then again, a tentative signal of discomfort rather than contentment, and she let out a soft, hoarse exhale. The ranger observed her chest, noting how shallow each rise was, how unevenly the rhythm marked time. He adjusted his position again, sinking lower into the grass, a quiet witness to her fragile state. "It's okay, girl," he murmured under his breath, almost a whisper blending with the wind, carrying no judgment, only presence. Around her, the savanna continued its indifferent symphony. A lone termite mound jutted like a silent monument in the distance, shadows stretching and twisting with the fading light. Birds settled into the acacia trees, wings rustling softly, and insects hummed, filling the warm air with their small insistence. The lioness shifted slightly, a subtle curl of her paw, a faint rise of her head, a signal of effort, a fragile testament to endurance. The ranger's eyes followed each movement, reading the language of life in small gestures. There was no rush, no interference, only the quiet act of observing, of marking time with an animal suspended in delicate tension. As the light softened further, brushing the savanna in muted golds and deepening shadows, the lioness remained still, poised between fragility and survival. The ranger stayed, patient and respectful, his presence a calm anchor in the hush of twilight, each moment stretching long and intimate beneath the fading sun. Darkness crept over the savanna like a heavy blanket, folding the land into muted shapes and shadows. The air had grown thick with the scent of impending rain, and distant rumbles rolled low across the plains, vibrating through the soil and the lioness alike. She shifted slightly, dragging herself forward with an uneven, laborious grace, each movement deliberate and measured against the ache in her body. Her breathing remained shallow, chest rising and falling with tremulous effort, yet she persisted, her head lowering to brush against the dry grass, eyes half closed, seeking a patch of comfort in the unyielding earth. The faint glow of distant lightning cast the occasional stark silhouette, illuminating the curve of her spine, the sharp outline of her ribs beneath her fur, a quiet testament to both her pain and persistence. The ranger followed at a slow, careful distance, mindful of every step. He had placed a shallow dish of water nearby earlier, and now he watched as she hesitated, sniffing the liquid before tipping her head to drink in small, cautious sips. He did not approach, did not urge her, only maintained a steady presence, an anchor in the swirling uncertainty of the night. His breath was slow, deliberate, matching the rhythm of her tentative movements, a silent communication of patience. Each glance she cast in his direction was brief, hesitant, yet it carried a fragile acknowledgement, a tiny spark of trust forming amid her exhaustion. The wind rose, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant fire from the storm's early sparks. Rain began in soft, erratic taps, dampening her fur, pressing her closer to the soil, and yet she remained upright, trembling but unwilling to succumb. A flick of her tail, a brief shudder of her shoulders, subtle gestures that spoke of discomfort and resilience alike, were captured carefully by the ranger's watchful eye. He murmured once, barely audible, "You're almost there," a quiet encouragement that mingled with the storm's first distant gusts. It was not meant to direct, but to bear witness, a recognition of her endurance in a world that offered no certainty. As the night deepened, her eyes brightened in faint glimmers, pupils widening and narrowing as she scanned the darkness, tracking subtle movements in the grass, the whisper of wings overhead. Each small shift, lifting her paw, tilting her head, blinking against the falling rain, marked the slow return of awareness, a tentative dialogue between body and environment. The storm's energy pressed against her, wind and water mingling with the dust on her coat, yet she remained poised between surrender and survival, fragile and resolute. The ranger stayed low, letting her dictate the distance and pace, offering water, space and calm attention. In that long electric night, the savannah seemed to hold its breath, storm and silence mingling, rain striking the earth with soft insistence. And through it all, the lioness endured, small tremors of effort marking her persistence, each cautious breath a quiet declaration of life in the gathering dark. The first light of dawn seeped softly across the savannah, painting the grasses in muted golds and pale pinks, the sky stretched thin with delicate haze. The lioness remained motionless for long moments, her body pressed low, chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths, but something in her posture had shifted. She was no longer merely wounded. The ranger noticed the subtle swell of her abdomen, the way her muscles tightened with restrained effort, the gentle rounding of her flanks against the soft dust. She was carrying life, a secret strength hidden beneath her stillness, and the realization settled quietly in the ranger's mind. Her immobility was not surrender, but a careful conservation of energy, a quiet preparation for the arrival of something fragile and rare. He remained at a careful distance, watching, every movement measured and silent. The air was cool with early morning dew, and the faint rustle of leaves and grass carried a heightened intimacy, as if the savannah itself had slowed, aware of the delicate tension threading through the plain. The lioness shifted her weight slightly, one paw sliding forward and then back, a subtle adjustment that betrayed both discomfort and determination. Her eyes flickered open briefly, dark and glossy, reflecting the pale light, scanning the horizon with a vigilance softened by exhaustion. The swell of her body moved in tandem with shallow breaths, and small tremors ran along her shoulders, a quiet rhythm of preparation. The wind whispered across the grasses, stirring the scattered dust, and birds settled into the acacias, their quiet chirps filling the soft, expectant air. The lioness's ears flicked at the distant sounds, but she remained focused inward, a silent negotiation with the life she carried. The ranger observed her head tilt slightly, lips brushing the soil as if seeking reassurance from the earth itself, the faintest exhale escaping her muzzle. He offered no intrusion, only a presence that matched her patience, a steady calm alongside her fragile labor of anticipation. "It's okay, girl," he whispered, voice barely rising above the dawn, a thread of comfort in the vast openness. Subtle signs of effort appeared in her movements, the gentle arching of her back, the shifting of her hindquarters, a tightening of muscles that spoke of preparation rather than weakness. The golden light traced every contour, highlighting the taut lines of her body, the slight quiver in her paws, and the soft sheen of sweat and dew along her fur. Each breath, each adjustment, seemed to echo through the quiet savannah, marking a rhythm that was both intimate and monumental, a fragile declaration of life in a raw and untamed landscape. The ranger stayed low, patient and reverent, allowing the lioness the space to negotiate the threshold between pain, endurance, and the imminence of birth. Around them, the plains stirred gently with dawn, a distant ripple of movement in a herd, the soft sway of grasses in the breeze, yet all of it felt suspended, hushed in recognition of the rare vulnerability unfolding. And in that quiet expanse, the lioness remained poised, her body still and purposeful, a solitary figure of resilience, preparing to usher life into the slow, golden awakening of the savannah. The sun had climbed higher, but the day held a muted quality, filtered through drifting clouds that mirrored the tension on the ground. The lioness shifted with painstaking care, her body trembling as contractions rolled through her, each movement measured against the weight of exhaustion pressing on every muscle. The savannah seemed to bend around her struggle, grass bending under the soft wind, distant birds pausing mid-flight, and even the scattered termite mounds casting longer shadows in recognition of the fragile work taking place. She groaned softly, a deep, almost imperceptible sound that rippled through the quiet air, ears flicking at every distant noise, head lowered in concentration, eyes half closed but glimmering with determination. The ranger remained at a careful distance, crouched low in the grass, flanked by a veterinary team who moved with the same deliberate respect. Their presence was calm, unobtrusive, synchronized with the rhythms of the lioness's body. They offered water, monitored the steady yet fragile rise and fall of her chest, and prepared for intervention, though only when the delicate balance of nature demanded it. The lioness's paws dug into the soft soil, her tail twitching sporadically, muscles tightening with the undeniable intensity of labor. Her movements were laborious, weighted with pain, yet underscored by a resolute drive that seemed to radiate through the quiet savanna. Hours passed in unmarked stretches of tension. The light shifted gradually, brushing across her fur in pale gold, illuminating the slight sheen of sweat and dust that clung to her body. She shifted her head, licked her flanks with slow, careful motions, a primal gesture of both comfort and instinct, drawing on strength she seemed only to discover in the moment. The ranger murmured softly once, "You're almost there," barely above a whisper, a thread of reassurance that blended with the wind and distant calls of birds. Each subtle sound, each small movement, carried immense weight, echoing through the suspended calm of the plain. Then, with a final, trembling surge, the lioness convulsed with effort, her body racked but resolute. A tiny, wet bundle appeared beneath her, slick fur pressed against the soil, and a fragile cry broke the long, oppressive silence. The sound, sharp and insistent, seemed to suspend the air itself. Even the wind held its breath as the newborn's small, quivering body drew the instinctive attention of its mother. She nuzzled it carefully, licking and nudging with deliberate gentleness, eyes glimmering with recognition and cautious pride. The ranger exhaled quietly as if releasing a tension held over hours, and the veterinary team remained still, watching the moment without intrusion. The first breath, the first tremor of life, carried through the savanna like a delicate pulse. The mother and cub pressed close, the small cries gradually softening, a fragile rhythm of survival and trust settling across the grasslands. The sun, now higher but softened by drifting clouds, brushed the pair with gentle warmth, painting the lioness and her newborn in tender gold. The moment hung suspended, a quiet testament to endurance, instinct, and the fragile wonder of life emerging against the odds. The sun dipped low over the savanna, spreading molten gold and muted amber across the tall grasses, and the horizon seemed to stretch farther than memory allowed. The lioness moved with quiet confidence now, her flanks strong and steady, every step measured but graceful. Beside her, the cub stumbled at first, tiny paws pressing into soft soil, then gaining rhythm as its mother guided it gently through the undulating terrain. Their bodies brushed occasionally, a subtle communication of warmth and reassurance, a silent conversation born of instinct and care. The grasses swayed softly in the evening breeze, casting shadows that danced across the lioness's tawny coat, highlighting the muscles that had once trembled in weakness but now flexed with renewed life. The ranger and the veterinary team observed from a respectful distance, hidden in the soft folds of the terrain, hearts lifted but tempered by quiet reverence. There was no need for intervention, no urgency in their presence, only the steady witness of humans who had shared in a fragment of the wild's delicate story. The lioness's eyes flicked briefly toward them, dark and aware, a recognition tempered with the independence of her regained strength. She was no longer a figure of fragility, she was resilience embodied, a living testament to the quiet persistence of life in the harsh, unyielding expanse of the savanna. The cub stumbled once, then paused, tilting its head to look at the tall grass, ears flicking at distant calls, eyes wide with wonder and tentative curiosity. Its small growl, soft and uncertain, blended with the gentle rustle of leaves and the far-off cry of a lone bird. The mother lowered her head, nuzzling the cub gently, guiding it forward with subtle pressure of her muzzle and a flick of her tail. Each step seemed to echo across the golden landscape, a rhythm of survival and trust, movement and learning, the fragile beginnings of independence nestled within maternal strength. As they advanced, the sun continued its slow descent, spilling warm, amber light across the horizon. The grasses waved, wind moving through them like a whisper, and the distant silhouettes of other wildlife drifted across the plains, creating a quiet, living backdrop. The lioness paused once on a small rise, her head raised, eyes scanning the expanse, ears flicking at the soft murmur of the world around her. The cub pressed close, trembling slightly in the shadow of her presence, and she lowered her muzzle, brushing it softly against the tiny body, a gesture of comfort, of reassurance, of life continuing. The humans remained silent, still, knowing their role had ended. Their presence mattered no longer, the story was hers to carry forward. The lioness moved steadily, leading her cub toward the horizon, each step a subtle declaration of endurance, of new beginnings. The sun's final glow painted them in soft gold, silhouettes stretching long across the savanna, and as they disappeared into the folds of grass and distance, the memory of her quiet resilience lingered. It remained with those who had watched, a gentle, enduring echo of survival, strength, and the fragile, luminous pulse of life in the wild.